Welcome to RITSEC. Oh yeah, join the Discord. We're great, and when you join the Discord, you can go ahead and sign in because I dropped the sign in on time, aka right now. So it's great. Please sign in. We love those numbers, and that's great. But check the calendar for times such as when IRSEC is happening, when interest groups are happening, when WISA CTF is happening, a lot of when things are happening. Check the calendar so you don't have to keep asking me about it. RITSEC mailing list, learn what the presentations are, the research presentations, the education presentations, and everything that's going on in the week. We work very hard on our mailing letter, and when I say we, I mean Raina. So you should appreciate their work. RITSEC feedback, we want to hear what I'm doing wrong, what Chase is doing wrong, what other people are doing wrong, or what we're doing right. We would love to hear about it. Education topics, this is new. I made the form, so hopefully it works. Basically, if you guys have any educational topics that you want to learn about for an hour during like this portion of the meeting, and you have an idea or something that like RITSEC hasn't done, or that you're like, oh, this is on the YouTube and it hasn't been done in like the past 3 years, can we do it this year? Put it in there, and I will find someone, hopefully, to fit it into next semester and have somebody present it. That's cool and be interesting. Announcements! IRSEC, Saturday, November 4th, 2023. Cool. White team signups. The signups were extended till next Thursday, so you can still sign up for it. It's great. Please sign up. White team is a really fun. Kenny came up. White team is really fun and awesome, and you guys should do it because it helps run the competition. Blue teams were released. Check the Discord. If you applied to be on a blue team, they were dropped in the announcements, and you can check out if you're on blue team or not. And if you are, go and meet your fellow teammates and talk to them and get their Discords and exchange information so you guys can have a little team group chat. Sign-ups for Brick City this weekend. Kenny can talk about that.
We're doing a little shindig for Brick City tomorrow. And I need you guys to volunteer because although our IG leads are so talented, we get tired and we need help from you guys. If you guys want to contribute and be a part of the club, please sign up. I put in announcements, but not a lot of people signed up, so please sign up. I don't want to be lonely. Thank you. It's going to be so much fun. We're going to pack this area. We'll be doing demos. Woo!
Yippee! Right. Yeah, sign up. This is a QR code. I made it orange because it's cool. Next, sponsors. Clap it up for the sponsors. Yay! 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 Okay. That's it. Cool. I wasn't cheering. I watched. Follow us on social media. For those of you who applied for social media head, make sure you're following the social media. Also, the social media head, or head of social media, does a lot. And you should appreciate their work on RITSEC on the Instagram and on the X now. I don't have Twitter, so it's Twitter to me. And finally, our presentation, Blue Teaming, Windows, and Linux, given by Chandi and Joe. Let's give them a round of applause to start while we switch the computers.
Okay, hopefully I'm speaking loud enough, because I am very introverted, but welcome to Blue Team, Windows, and Linux, or just Blue Teaming in general, because that's what I made the presentation around. So to start, tell you about myself. You all probably already know who I am in this room, but I'm going to be honest, it's week 7, I don't know like any of the new people here, which sucks. So if you're going to talk to me, and we haven't met before, please tell me your name. But anyway, some basic info about me. Oh, wait a minute. Okay. I'm a 4th year, CSEC, only getting a bachelor's. I'm from Northern Virginia, where all the RITSEC graduates are, because there's a micro center there. As you know, I play lots of Fortnite. Yes. I stopped playing Destiny 2, at least until February. I'm on the U.S. Cyber team, so that's where the word Cyber Olympian comes from. And I am the team captain of both the CTF team here, the Team Contagion, and CCC. So I kind of know a little bit what I'm talking about. And in terms of competition experience, I have way too many competitions. Too many. Way too many.
Oh, there we go. So, hi, I'm Joe. I'm a third/fourth year CSEC BSMS. I have 2 years left. From the great place of Long Island. Oh yeah, he knows.
Run it up.
He knows. It's so good. CPTC member. Wishing the best of luck in Ohio right now. CSHE board, sysadmin, pep band. Go to hockey this weekend. You better be there. Red vs blue. If it involves code, chances are I'm gonna write it. I have this thing where if you show me a code project, I'll just start writing for it in about 4 hours. Last year I did IRSEC and ISTS. Got first in IRSEC, second ISTS. Fun time. And now I'm here to help explain how to do Linux, how I did last year. Alright, this is mine. So what is a blue team competition? Well, for those who signed up for IRSEC, what are you signed up for? What have you gotten yourself into? So red vs blue competition is when the defending teams, the blue teams, are up against the attacking team, the red team. There is one red team for all of the blue team. Blue teamers have a network, so you'll have a bunch of machines that are connected over some form of router, some form of infrastructure. They all have a bunch of services. So think of like a company, they may have some user organizations, some websites, some databases, and it's going to be your job to defend those services. Alongside that, you'll also be handling injects, which are kind of jobs that your boss is giving you to complete. We're going to get more into injects later. You have many hats when you're a blue teamer. You're a sysadmin. You're managing services, keeping them up, making config changes, all that. You're a threat hunter. You gotta find red team. You gotta kick them out. They're messing with your services, causing downtime. Analyst, you're trying to see what the red team tools are doing and how to stop them. Incident response, you're gonna have enough incidents during this competition that you'll have something to respond to. And engineer, you're gonna be having to think outside the box. You're gonna have to come up with unique solutions to the problems that you're gonna encounter. There's gonna be how to get your service online, how to implement something new that's part of an inject, or just something completely out there that no one knows about yet. Depending on the competition, red team could have a pre-bake, which means that they are able to inject malware into your systems prior to the competition start. But it really doesn't matter. Either way, red team can get in. Do you want to talk about the CCP?
Yeah. So you might be thinking that pre-baking sounds pretty unfair because like, oh, the red team gets to do stuff to my machine before I can even touch it. But it doesn't really matter because, for example, at CCDC, which is like a national big collegiate red versus blue competition, at the national level they don't pre-bake, and in 2020 it took them about 2 minutes to break into a network without pre-baking. So it's like it doesn't really matter. You're still gonna get compromised either way, but don't worry about it. So don't like be like, oh my god, they only got through my system to say pre-bake. No, it'll happen.
Yeah, they're gonna get in. It's your job to get them out.
I'll go with this one. Yeah. So the presentation is going to follow this format, but it's also a list of things your team should be doing during competition, right? So we'll be walking through how to do each of these things for both Windows and Linux. So first you have your 5-minute plan, which is basically just a list of actions that allow you to harden and gain control over your system, including things that provide like the most security value in the shortest amount of time. So as we established, red team already has a jump on you. So all of the things that I've listed here are things that will help you, like I said, gain control over your system and help secure it. So stuff like accessing your system, getting tools, gathering information, changing passwords, messing with users and groups, hardening your system and services, and then doing stuff like putting up firewalls, logging, setting up logging, all that stuff. You're probably asking, how am I supposed to do all that in 5 minutes? That's kind of a lot. And the answer is through scripting. So you can write scripts to automate as much of this stuff as possible, which can help you be more consistent because as humans, we are prone to error, but computers will do the same thing over and over again if you script it correctly. Now, the last 3 steps I have listed here are threat hunting, incident response, and injects. And I've highlighted them because they're not much like a sequence of steps. They're more like a cycle. So once you do your 5-minute plan, these three things are going to be things you're constantly juggling throughout the competition, right? You might be looking for malware on your system, and you find something, and then now you're in incident response because you discover the breach. Or you might be doing incident response, and then another inject just drops, and you're like, oh my god, I gotta do that. So basically, yeah, just like throughout the competition. Oh, we're gonna do Windows for this, okay? Because Windows is better than Linux.
Yeah, that's not true.
It is really true. It's actually true. So, starting, first thing you're gonna do when you get into competition is obviously access your system, right? You're probably thinking, oh, this is so easy. Why do you have a site on it? Well, it all comes down to what account you use. So, let's say, for example, that you have a Windows workstation, and you're like, okay, I got these funny credentials for like this thing called a domain admin account. Like, I'm gonna log in with those on the system, and part of my system went up because it's like really privileged and stuff. I can do things easily. Well, when you log in on the system with those credentials, the credentials will be in memory on that system. And Red Team, being the funny little goofy people that they are, can simply just take those credentials out of memory. And now they have domain admin credentials, and they can go mess up the rest of your network because of their very highly privileged credentials. So best practice is to use like local administrator accounts on regular systems, and only use domain administrator accounts and other privileged accounts on a domain controller. It's basically an example of the concept of principle of least privilege, which is the idea that you just give your users the least amount of privileges needed to complete their work. In this case, you don't need the privileges of a domain admin account to secure like a regular Windows 10 client. So you just use a local administrator account. You're essentially, as the professionals say, quote, minimizing the attack surface or whatever. I don't know. People say that all the time. By reducing the chances of Red Team just yoinking your creds and using them to pivot to your domain controller. If you want to know about stealing credentials from memory, there's a tool called Mimikatz. You can research that on your own. Anyways, moving on. Most times you're going to get a Windows box. All you got to do is just go through the GUI. Everyone knows how to do that. However, consider the following. You don't get a GUI. So if you look right here, that is an example of server core, which is just a terminal, right? They just give you a terminal and say, yeah, go figure it out. Server core is cringe. I hate it. It's just Windows trying to do Linux because it thinks it's cool enough.
It's a good time.
It's not fun. Don't. It's bad stuff. In terms of remote access, because sometimes you have Windows boxes that you can't access locally. You can use RDP. Red Team can also use RDP, so beware of that. WinRM is basically Windows Remote Management, and it's like Microsoft's implementation of SSH, except it's a lot more silly because the authentication sucks. But it lets you run commands remotely. And then this was something I found out last year. Windows comes with SSH since 2018. You get a client by default, but you can put a server on your Windows box, which, if you don't know about, Red Team can use that to like get into your system pretty easily. It's SSH. So if you don't need any of these remote access methods for a box, consider turning them off to minimize your attack surface, as they say. Anyways, moving on. Next up is gathering information about your system. So when you walk into your competition on November 4th, if you're doing ISM, you're going to get a box, and you're going to be like, what is on here? I don't know what's happening. What are the things that are running on this system? And this slide helps you figure out what you need to know so that you can gain an understanding of what's happening and try to harden your system. Also, there's usually an inject at the beginning of the competition, losing competition, that'll be like, can you give me a list of all the things running on your system and like an IP address, and you have to build like a network topology of all the systems on your network. So this will all help with that. In terms of information you want to get, host name and domain, that's really helpful because rarely the Red Team will unjoin your box from your domain and join it to theirs, which is not fun. But if you know the domain, you can spot that. Network adapter configuration, so sometimes the packet you get or your blue team competition will lie to you and use deceit and trickery to tell you that your box is on one IP when it's not. It's happened before, whether intentionally or unintentionally. So you want to know what your IP is of your box. Also DNS servers as well. Operating system information, users and groups, network connections. That's more like sort of threat hunting thing. If you look at the screenshot at the bottom left, that's an example of me using the netstat command to list all the listening ports on the system. So that'll help you figure out like if you have any funny listeners on your box that Red Team might be using to connect your box. Any installed services or programs, that'll just help you find like programs that shouldn't be there. And then of course SMB shares because Windows computers can have hotspots. On the right, I have a bunch of commands listed that you can use to help gather some information. And the rest of my slides are going to follow that sort of format. So I'll just have info on the left and commands on the right. The first command, get sim instance, this one's goated. Okay? Because sim is like this I guess it's a standard called Common Information Model. And it basically just consists of like a bunch of different information for a system. And Microsoft created a way to access that. So you can pull things like operating system information, users, process, like most of the stuff in this list you can just do through get sim instance. The other commands, get local group is like the local groups. Most of these are like you can tell what they do. I crossed out get local group member because it is quirky and unstable, like some people I know in this room. You got stuff for getting Active Directory group members, netstat with PowerShell, and then the rest of the commands are stuff you can run in like a normal command prompt to get group information, user information, IP address configuration. I mentioned netstat, that's for like getting network connections, and then netshare for SMB shares. Okay, moving on. Rotating passwords. So, let me switch my speaker notes. So rotating passwords is one of the most important things you should do at the start of competition. And the reason of that is because the red team already knows your credits from the start. Like when you get your boxes, your credentials are going to be reset to like some default, like password 123 or something. And you might know that, but the red team also knows that. So they can access your systems before you even have a chance to change the password, just by hitting a button somewhere in the side range. I don't know. There's probably a big red button somewhere that does that. So you should change your default passwords and do them fast to try and gain the upper hand over red team. Also, a lot of teams forget to change their default passwords. Like every single competition, there's always at least one team that like just forgets. And people miss passwords all the time. Like, you know, there's not just passwords for your system, but also your services and applications can have passwords. So that's why it's important to know what's going on in your system. Because if you're running like a database server, there might be some administrator credentials for like the database application. And if red team gets their hands on that, well then say goodbye to your database. To change passwords fast, you likely want to automate it. You can use some of the funny commands that I will explain in a moment to do that, or write your own script. And also, one last thing is that you should be prepared to change your passwords multiple times. Change them once is not enough. For example, if you find something which is like a keylogger, right? And you remove it, but you only found it after you changed your passwords, then there's probably a good chance that the red team knows whatever password you just typed in because they have a keylogger, and you only removed it after you changed password. So you should assume that your box has been compromised and change the passwords again. And this might happen multiple times throughout the competition as you find stuff, so just be prepared to do that. Information about the commands on the right. Set local user is just like a PowerShell version of changing the password. There's set 80 account password for Active Directory accounts. This funny one-liner that I wrote a lot of one-liners, This basically just like runs through like the LDAP structure or whatever. You were here last week, remember Active Directory, and gathers all the users that aren't you, so aren't the current logon user, and then changes their password, whatever you set it to. And then down here I have net user. If you specify an asterisk, that just prompts you for a password. instead of just like having to type it in. And then this command here, basically gathers a list of all the users on the system that have local accounts, and not your username, and throws them to a file, which you could use to script changing passwords or whatever, if you want. It's up to you. Oh, yeah, I did move to the other side. All right. Next thing, you need to audit your users and groups because Red Team will put funny users called Red Team and I don't know.
Not Red Team.
Not Red Team. Enzo. Miller's goated. Put that one on there. Yeah, they'll put a bunch of users and stuff on your system that shouldn't be there, and it's your job to figure out what users should be there and shouldn't be there, and delete them if they shouldn't be there. Also, users in Windows have properties that could be abused. So stuff like making your password never expire, using reversible encryption to store a password, disabling an account, which, by the way, I don't know if you mentioned this, but some scoring checks run off of user accounts. So if Red Team disables the scored user, then your scoring check is like broken, and you need to fix that. So you have to look out for that. Best practice when you see a user that shouldn't be there is to disable it, and then like take a screenshot of it and be like, "Yo, I found this user on my system. It's bad." Instead of just deleting it and not taking any sort of evidence. You want to audit group membership. So, like I was saying, you might have an account called Red Team, and they might put that one in the administrator group. And if you didn't notice that, that'd be bad because now Red Team has admin access to your box and can do bad things to it. So check group membership. If you want to manage stuff through the GUI, you can use these two applications that are written down here. One for local users and one for Active Directory. And then for the commands, there are so many commands to manage users. They're mostly self-explanatory, like give your name. Another funny one-liner I wrote. This one, again, gets all the users in Active Directory from LDAP, except for your username, and then you can either disable them or not. I don't know, it's a funny one-liner. You should consider using it or not.
Can I say something real quick?
Yeah.
Yeah, one quick thing I want to add to this. In some competitions, there may be users that are the ones that you have to defend, like the actual users. There may also be one that is the user for the infrastructure. So the one that the black team or gray team may be using to administer the competition. And often it is that you can't touch that user. So make sure if you're going to run a funny one-liner that it's not going to disable, change password, delete that user, because then gray team may come and find you.
No, you should totally do it. You'll win automatically. Trust me.
Oh, so true.
Trust me. I know what I'm talking about. Anyways, moving on. Now we're getting to the real fun stuff, system hardening. I don't have any commands here because there's like so many different ways to harden Windows, right? It's not, the default configuration is not secure. Remember what I said about minimizing the attack surface? That's basically this entire slide, right? You're hardening your system, you're trying to limit your box to doing what it's only intended to do. And that through that, you do stuff like turn off unneeded services, turn on a firewall, harden your critical services, mitigate different vulnerabilities and misconfigurations in the system. You're basically just trying to remove as many potential ways for Red Team to get in as possible. You can set your settings through things like group policy or registry, which we'll talk about in a few slides. I think it's actually the next slide. And also, if you want to get like a head start on all these different settings, you can research hardening guides, which I've linked to, two of them there, and also the Matter Attack Framework, which surprisingly is very good for blue team. I know red team likes it because they can just go there and like look at an attack they want, and they're like, okay, we can just write some code for that. But on the blue team side, you can go look at it and be like, oh, this is an attack that is pretty common, and it'll probably have some section on mitigating or detecting it. So check it out.
You gotta do that. You don't need to do that.
You should do that. See, he's getting scared.
You can just leave it there.
He's worried. He's a red team. He's worried. Right? If you want to know how good this information is, just look at any red team in the room and watch their face. But yeah, fire attack is good. I've read the whole thing actually. Something weird like that.
And that's crazy.
Anyways, it wasn't the next slide. We're talking about the firewall, Windows Defender firewall. Firewalls are goated. Okay, they're very easy W. You you just throw it up and it'll like block new connections. So red team can't just access your system if they want to. There's 3 different profiles, but you don't have to worry about that too much. Each profile has different settings, including things like configuring logging. That's pretty important because logs are important. You want to see who's trying to connect to your system. You can also write different rules for the firewall. You can put them via the GUI or through the command line. It's important to caption is blocking. You can use the following commands up there above the meme to set firewall rules. As an example, the first box is me turning the firewall on first off, and then setting the policy to block both inbound and outbound traffic. I know you can't really see it, but that's what it's doing. And then the second rule, or the second screenshot, is me making a rule to allow inbound UDP traffic on port 53 for like a DNS server.
Also, if you're gonna block everything, make sure you test your firewall before you actually do that. Because if it's a remote box, aka one that you don't have console access, and you block yourself out, that sucks. Because now you just lost your box.
That is true. I have locked myself out sometimes.
Me too.
Okay, go on. Oh, one more thing. Another reason why the firewall is goated through blocking new connections is because, arguably, I mean, I might confess this, but keeping red team out is probably more important than getting them out. Because if you can keep them from making new connections, then you can focus on getting them out after that. He's thumbs down because he knows it's good advice. Now we're going to talk about group policy. All right. So group policy is this really big, powerful tool that you can just set a bunch of different settings in. And look at this. Look, there's like so many different settings. I don't know the exact count. I think it's like 2,000 something settings. But every setting corresponds to like a different registry key, which we'll talk about the registry later. Every computer has a local group policy. If you're using Active Directory, it's called group policy objects, and you can apply those objects to different containers. If that makes sense. The order in which group policy is applied, basically the local policy is applied first, then it goes like your domain policy, and then other, I think, organizational units or whatever. Mm-hmm. This is a really powerful tool if you know how to use it. Some of the settings can either help you or harm you. So I recommend you figure out what the most important settings are, experiment on a test system, and document your findings. Some tools I've listed here. The first is a PowerShell commandlet for importing group policy objects to Active Directory. lgpo.exe is a way to export and import group policy on a local system. And then this GP update /force is fun because you can use that to trigger a group policy refresh. So if you apply your settings, if you import your settings, then you can just use that command to trigger the group policy to apply all of your settings. And hopefully you will not break anything. Hopefully. Also, one other thing to mention, allegedly, I haven't tested this, but allegedly, if you kick a box off of the domain that it's joined to, the domain policy supposedly just goes away and is replaced by your local policy. So that's why it's important to set local policy and domain policy, just in case red team decides to say you don't want a domain anymore. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Security templates. So security templates, you saw in the screenshot, that was like a subset of group policy. But security templates are basically config files that allow you to apply custom security settings to your local security policy. You can use secpol.msc to look at the local security policy. Security templates can do things like set a password policy, account lockout, audit policy, assigning privileges to users and groups. Also, looking at system services, you can set system services. So like, if there's like a service you don't want running, you can put in the security policy, disable that service, and they'll disable it, which you can use to break your system like I did. You can also set auditing on registry keys and certain files as well. And not just auditing, like actual like security permissions, to like lock down any files that you don't want red team to access. Like, I don't know, I think like the SAM database or whatever. I don't know, it just came to mind. Where all your passwords are stored. Anyways, there's another tool called security configuration analysis. You can use that to compare your template settings to the current values on the system, and then apply those settings as well. I think that one's probably the most helpful tool, because you can do a direct comparison between the system. Oh boy, logging. I got 2 slides on logging. Logging is important. Okay. Logging basically allows you to see what's going on in your system, because and seeing what Red Team does on your system. There's some general things to look out for. So you want to look for like any attempt to like authenticate to your system, any changes to the system. So like changes like configuration files or whatever. You want to look at your firewall logs when you try to access your system. See if they've actually made access to your system. Because if they're successful, that's like bad, and you gotta like do something about that. You want to see if they access any resources. So if they go and like mess with any important configuration files, or like any sort of files that are like, I don't know, on a file share maybe, and of course any failures. So if Red Team like shuts down your stored service, obviously you want to know about that before it's too late and you see it red on your scoreboard, because that's bad. You can set an audit policy through things like group policy or security template, or using this command line tool called audit which can help you, figure out what events that you want Windows to log. Because by default, it's not great. You're gonna want to change that. The file system in Windows lets you set auditing on objects, stuff like file folders and registry keys, which can be helpful for monitoring specific directories that Red Team will want to access or like put their malware in. There's some default log files that Windows comes with. There's like 4. The most important one is security, because that's where you're gonna find all the funny events. Like I've written down here, this stuff like successful or failed logons, any attempts to access an object, when people modify the registry. I'd say this one is most important, when a new process gets created, because that one lets you look at, Red Team launches some malware on your system, and you can log the new process and be like, oh, that's not supposed to happen. Let me go kill that process. Also, creating user accounts and blocking a packet or connection, which is a Windows firewall thing. Actually, one more thing. This registry key is a go-to registry key. This basically, you can steal this. I'll let you have this one for free. Basically, it logs the command line arguments of any process that gets stored on the Windows system, which is very important for threat hunting. Because, if he launches a process called like
Defender API.exe.
Yeah, if he launches that, right? You can see the command line arguments and be like, that's not supposed to be there. That's bullshit. And kill it. Make his day bad. You're probably asking at this point, well, how do I see all these logs, right? You just told me a bunch of different logs, how I look at them. You can use Event Viewer or this command line tool called WEBC-USIL. Event Viewer looks like that. You can do all sorts of things like just scroll through logs, apply filters for certain IDs, whatever. You might be asking, well, I want more information for my logs. And then you should go look at Sysmon, which is a sysinternals tool that lets you, I think it just audits more information, pulls more information about certain events on the system. And you can look at those logs as well if you configure the application correctly. Finally, applications and services have their own logs. So like a web server on Windows would have its own logs, including PowerShell. PowerShell has its own logs, which can be very helpful for spotting Red Team activity because they love PowerShell too much. But you have to set that up yourself. That is left to exercise through the reader. Oh boy, registry. All right. It's a lot of content, sorry. But talk about the registry. The registry is one of the places of all time in Windows. It is where everything is. So many registry keys exist. It's mind-boggling how many settings exist. Like you can harden your system, you can harden services, you can disable services, you can establish persistence through the registry. There's a lot of different things. As I was saying before, the group policy sets values in the registry, but it's not the other way around. So if you set something in group policy, and some red teamer goes, I'm going to change the registry value, it's probably not going to be reflected in the group policy. So you need to look, you need to monitor the registry keys and be like, okay, I need to see if something changes. Some of the registry keys, when you modify them, you have to reboot them to make sure the system actually applies the settings. If it's Windows, and it's funny and cool like that. I've had thousands of commands here that you can use to modify the registry. Please test this on like a VM. Don't do this on your host machine or you'll break it and you'll have a bad time. Let's see. I give you another free registry key here. This one turns on protection mode for LSAS, which is the executable that handles authentication in Windows. That is related to the concept of stealing credentials from memory. You can research that if you want to, but free key. Free protection for you. Make red team's life hard.
You don't want to do that.
You do want to do that. Do it. I think this is the last side on Windows. No, there's more. There's always more. This is like the talking about threat hunting now, or what do you call it?
Runting.
Runting? I'm not going to say that. Threat hunting. So the concept of threat hunting is just you're searching for malicious behavior, right? You could either search for malicious behavior on your own, or just wait for it to come to you and then have a bad time. But if you search for it, there's a good chance you'll find it before it can really do anything bad to your system. So as we established, the red team pre-bakes on your system. So threat hunting will be really helpful for trying to find those pre-baked binaries or scripts or registry keys or whatever. There's a lot of ways to establish persistence in Windows, and by persistence I mean like being able to keep access to the system across reboots or whatever. There's startup programs, there's tasks, there's run keys, which I've listed 2 of them here, and lots more. Misconfigurations, malicious processes, malicious services, and more. There's a lot more. I mean, you can go read the minor attack framework section on persistence. There's a lot of different ways to do that. Like the other day, I found like a blog post that had 119 different ways to persist in Windows. Like 119. Okay, that's a lot. Now I was researching for CCDC, so when I saw that, I wanted to die inside, but you know, can't get them all, I guess. But yeah, everything is important. So please research that, look into that. Let's see. Now we're talking about some tools that'll help you threat hunt. So if you were here for, I think, week 2, where Caleb covered Windows, we talked briefly about this, and we'll talk about some of the tools in the next few slides. First thing I want to talk about is auto runs. This tool helps you look at well-known auto start locations. So we just talked about persistence. This tool will help you look for those different entries across a lot of different things, like entities, schedule tasks, services, and it'll help you spot activity that shouldn't be there, or files that shouldn't be there. However, it does have its limitations. It's not a silver bullet or magic bullet, whatever you call it. Not every location is monitored in autorun. I tried to find a list yesterday of all the locations that were monitored, and I couldn't. I guess I had one before, but I don't know where it is. So you have to do your own research as to what is monitored and what it doesn't. Basically, these tools have their limits, and you should be aware of that. Next, I want to talk about Process Explorer. This is just Task Manager 1 loaded. It shows a lot more information than what Task Manager shows, like command line arguments, the owner of the process, the process tree, any loaded DLLs it has, which if you want to know about that, that's just DLL injection. That's like something you should look into. But again, it has its limits, right? Like all the tools, they have their limits. This one I found out I think it was like last month. Apparently, a researcher found that you can mess with command line arguments of a process. You trick Process Explorer into thinking that it's like a verified process, or because the command lines arguments are different. So as a blue teamer, you can get around this by logging process creation events, because the log will show the true arguments. As a red teamer, I'm not going to give you the tweet. You got to go find that yourself. Figure out how to do that. Good luck. Exo Process Monitor. This one just has real-time monitoring of all the operations on Windows. So like any file system operations, registry operations, process operations. You can use it to find malicious activity, but there's a lot of different things that happen in the background on Windows. So this is a lot of stuff to see through, which is why they've implemented a very fine-grained filtering mechanism where you can filter by different keys, different processes, and file names and more. Very helpful. I think this is the last tool I'm going to cover, TCP view. This is like NextSat, but better. It enumerates all the active TCP and UDP like endpoints on the system. It gives you like a process name, what protocol it is, state of the connection, ports, addresses, creation time. Automatically refreshes every second, so you don't have to like do this weird NextSat thing where you have to like, because there's like no watch command in Windows, right?
Mm.
So you gotta like do some weird command stuff. But or you can just use this. Make sure to look for any weird connections, any weird ports and programs shouldn't be running. That'll help you find red team activity pretty easily. Finally, before I hand it over, I'd like to give you some tips on services for Windows. For Active Directory, if your domain controller is compromised, your world is on fire. There's no way around it. If red team's in there, it's bad. So you should always have somebody on your domain controller and always be looking and responding to threats on there. Active Directory has a lot of ports. Make sure that you aren't blocking yourself out of scoring through your firewall. And there's also a lot of common attacks for Active Directory, which I have linked there. For DNS, you want to back up your config files and then use that tool to manage DNS settings. SMB, you want to disable SMB version 1, that's bad. Back up your shares, lock down the permissions on the share so red team can't just go and delete all of the files because they would do that in a heartbeat. For remote access stuff, so like WinRM and RDP, I said the authentication level was bad by default, but you can make it stronger. So do that. And also restrict access to it. And then for web, that's also a thing on Windows. Back up your website, harden the server, and yeah, do that. Finally, for all your services, most of them have some form of logging. Please set that up to catch any funny attempts to access it. And then for scoring, make sure your user creds on the scoreboard are the same as the user creds on your boxes, because you're going to change the user creds, but some people don't change the creds on the scoreboard. So scoring breaks and they're like, oh my god, scoring is down. I don't know what just happened. And it's like, dude, you didn't change your password on the scoreboard. Please do that. Now I will hand it over to Joe to talk about Linux.
Oh yeah, what's out here? So you know, there's Windows. That's like fine, but Linux is where it's at. We're gonna go basically everything that Chandi did, but for the better operating system. So yeah, Linux. System access. The two main ways that you're gonna see a system are the GUI, which will just depend on the installation, or the console, the command line. Personally, I believe that the GUI won't really help you in a competition. I think the command line has all the commands you're going to need. The only thing you might need a GUI for is Wireshark, which we'll get to. So for the most part, you're going to be running commands. In terms of remote access for remote boxes, SSH is your go-to. You simply write SSH, the username you're trying to connect to, at IP, or domain name, and then it'll prompt you to enter the password or use SSH key authentication to let you in. Rarely, you'll see VNC, which is a way to remotely connect with the GUI, similar to Windows RDP. There's numerous clients out there for Linux. I'm going to let you research that on your own for which one works best. But yeah, it's very rare that you'll see that in a competition. Tooling. We got a lot of tools, kinda. We don't have any like formal ones like sysutil but we do have a lot that can help you in a competition. Wireshark is a simple tool. You can use it in sysadmin to capture packets. It'll show you all incoming traffic and outgoing traffic to your server on a given interface. So you can try and see maybe what ports red team's trying to talk to, any weird domains that it's trying to contact over DNS, and that may help you narrow down what red team's using as an attack vector so you can try and block it. You see in the screenshot, this wide shot capture has someone running, it has in it, RM tackle /no preserve root. Chances are that's not something that shows up in normal traffic, so you want to investigate that packet and how it got there. Scripts, custom made. You can definitely make a lot of scripts to your 5-minute plan to automate a lot of commands I'm going to go over. Do firewall checks, user audit, process checks. But make sure you trust whatever you're running, because red team can modify it. So if you're just running a script constantly as sudo, and all of a sudden in between your runs, red team changes it out for something else, you're not running that as sudo, which isn't going to be too good. And GitHub has a bunch of tools that are open source. One that I highly recommend is PX. PX is PS, but in Python. It gives an advanced view on the processes running on your system. So you kind of see the process tree of which processes summon the next process. So if you see red team running a command, maybe they trace that back to the command shell that they're using, and maybe even to the beacon that started that command. System information. So you're going to need to get information on your system. There's very few commands they got to use for Linux. For the host name, you can either run the hostname command, or you can go to the etc hostname file in Linux. This is a persistent one that lasts through reboots. So if you want to change your host name, you're going to need to change it there. IP MAC address, you find through ifconfig. Not to be confused with ipconfig on Windows. So this will show you all interfaces, all MAC addresses, and it'll also help you potentially notice other programs running on your system. For example, Docker will create an interface and a subnet, typically 172.17.0.0/16. So if you see that, chances are there's Docker in your system. And if it's not supposed to be there, you may want to look into that. Kernel and OS versions. So uname is able to present you with your kernel version, your OS version, all of that. And etc OS release shows it in a bit more of a taller format, and it's in a file. Services. If services are what run in the background on Linux, it's kind of how all your things like SMB, SSH are going to be running in a daemon process. So you can do systemctl, tac type equals service, and it will show you the status and active processes of every service that's installed on your system. Finally, users, etc password will show you all users with their information. So in there you'll find stuff like their UID, their active shell, and if they have a password set. If you do have a password, it'll be an etc shadow. And to get their groups, you would run the groups command, which would just be groups followed by the username. It's kind of blocked by the text. This right here is also just a quick command. Shows you some important information. Neofetch. Neofetch can show you the OS, the host, a couple other things here. Not entirely helpful for a competition, but it can give you some information if you're looking to just quickly get something that's visual. Oops. Cool. Users and passwords, as I said, users and shells are kept in etc password. So in there, if you see a red team user, you may want to change their shell out with bin false or user bin no login. Those will help. Those will make it that if they try and access it via SSH, it'll block them out. Password hashes are kept in etc shadow on Linux. So again, this is a password hash, so you can't read the passwords in there. But if red team has access to this file, they can inject their password hash into your system. So knowing about that file and keeping it checked is good. You can also, I believe, put an exclamation point in a password hash to make it that the user has no password that can be used to log in. To change these without having to change these files and just breaking everything, you can use a password and user mod commands. So passwd, you do that followed by the username as root, and you will be able to change the password of a given user. User mod is a way to quickly change the groups, either add or remove a group, change the default shell, disable the user entirely. It's very useful for doing anything after a user's been made in Linux.
Can I say something?
Yep.
About etc password. So, as Joe said, etc password don't know why you gave me this.
I don't know.
SC password, you can use it to change user shells, right? Now, someone did this. I saw this during my time in CCDC. Well, someone made a sort of fake shell, sort of honeypot shell, if you will, and assigned it to all the users on the system so they could track what commands are being run. Now, I'm not saying you should do that, but you could. That's all I have to say.
That's big thing. Because you gotta keep in mind, if bin false and user bin no login are actually the bin false and no login, you can do this by just running it in your shell. Because wouldn't it be funny if I copied bash and made it bin false? Because then, you gave me bin false, if I have a shell. But yeah, PAM. PAM is permissive access modules in Linux. This is what Linux uses by default to run SU, SSHD, and FTP. So whenever you enter a password into these programs, they go through the PAM modules, and then that'll determine whether to accept or deny you. So this is cool if you're doing it like on a Linux system that has like a fingerprint sensor, like a ThinkPad. You could mess with PAM to let you do that. On Mac, you can use PAM to allow you to use sudo with Touch ID, but that's not Linux. Or you can use PAM to allow every password with like one line. So knowing how PAM works and how to audit the authentication modules in order to ensure that PAM is acting correctly is very important. Or you can disable PAM entirely through SSH, which we'll get to on a later slide. The root user. So as Chandi was saying, on Windows you have domain admin and administrators. On Linux you have root. Root is the equivalent to a system level account. It is the all-powerful account. It can do whatever you want, which makes it very good to do stuff, and also very scary when Red Team has root. Important thing to notice is it is UID 0, GID 0. So if you see an account in Etsy password that has the UID 0, even if it's not named root, it has root power. So checking for that is very important. Whenever you need to run a privileged command as non-root, the best practice is to use sudo because then it's logged. For example, if me and Chandi both have root and we're just running command, we don't know who's running that command. But if I, on my Joe account, run sudo command, it'll log that Joe used sudo to run command. Some examples of why you need sudo would be using user audit commands where you're changing other users, editing the config files of a system-wide service, for SS and netstat, which are commands to enumerate all active connections. If you want to see the process attached to that connection, you're going to need sudo, especially if it's not a process that you as the user created. And packages, which are the way that you install different applications or different tools on Linux. Furthermore, sudo has what's called Etsy sudoers, which can define who's allowed to use sudo. By default, on Debian and Ubuntu type systems, it is the sudo user. On Red Hat machines, it's typically the wheel user. But you can kind of put whatever you want in there. For example, red team all, no password all means the red team user can use sudo without entering their password. So even if they don't know their password because you changed it, if they have access to the account and they run sudo, they'll be allowed to use it. So checking Etsy sudoers for anything funky is very good. Auditing. So yes, there are many ways to harm Linux. Important one is updating services. Commonly you'll see old services such as VSFTPD, SSHD will have vulnerabilities in older versions. So if the infrastructure started with that old version, you're going to have to deal with patching that through an update. You do that depending on the operating system with some type of sudo apt update, sudo DNF update. Will all depend on the distribution of Linux that you're talking about. Firewalls. Firewalls are just as important in Linux as they are on Windows. Setting up firewalls has many different options, again, depending on distribution. On many Debian-based systems, you'll have UFW, which is uncomplicated firewall. Red Hat has something similar called Firewall D. But if you want to be advanced and use very precise, very powerful firewalls, you can use IP tables, which is what UFW is actually built on top of. So IP tables will allow you to set individual policies for the input and output. It'll allow you to map ports to other ports. It'll allow you to just completely block everything. So knowing how to use it can be complicated, but I highly recommend it if you have the time to learn it. If not, UFW works fine. It'll let you set a strong firewall to get you going. And fail to ban. Fail to ban is a very cool program that will ban an IP after too many failed attempts. So if red team's trying to brute force a password and they fail too many times, fail to ban will automatically ban that IP from your system. So it will definitely cause some more frustration for the red team or whoever's trying to attack the system. Also, when you're hardening, make sure you only run what's absolutely necessary. Whenever you're trying to threat hunt, look at the active processes on your system. If this is a database server, why is it running Nginx? The chances are that Nginx isn't Nginx. So checking through that through process enumeration, service enumeration, as we talked about, you'll be able to see anything funky that's going on. All right. Hardening part 2 is a bit more specific to different services that you're going to see on Linux. SSH, your common config file is going to be SSHD config. So when you're going to have a bunch of funny config options of how you can access your system over SSH. And there you'll find stuff like the port number, PAM authentication. So there'll be an option called use PAM, which defaults to yes. So if PAM is messed up, as we talked about previously, but you set use PAM to no, then it doesn't matter, and Linux will keep your password authentication secure without using PAM. Also, root login. By default, Linux SSHD will block the root user from SSHing, but it can be turned back on by adding permit root user yes. So something you might want to look out for, something you may want to turn off. If you want to be advanced, you can specify which users are allowed to log in, and then only those individual users will be allowed. So if you know the users that are supposed to be in the competition, you can specify that those are allowed to log in, nobody else, and any red team users that may have been made will be blocked out. Web, depending on the type of web application, if it's Apache 2, check if the PHP module is installed. If so, you may have some PHP reverse shells you gotta deal with. PHP is very funny in that it has this cool thing called system command, or system, whatever you want to call it. So you can quick and easy make a shell that a web application that takes in a command, runs it on a host system, and sends back the result of the command. Very fun. SQL and other types of services may have their own user space. So a SQL database has its users that are separate from the Linux users. This is also the case sometimes in Postfix or other mail applications. So researching these type of applications and finding out if there are other user spaces you have to deal with is very important. For example, if you have a MySQL database and you change all the passwords on the system, but the MySQL database still has the root user with the default password, red team can go in there, delete the database, change the data, and your support check will stop working. And then you'll be wondering, how'd they get in? I thought I changed the password. Well, you didn't change that password. Docker, you'll sometimes see a box that has a lot of Dockerized services. Common things you'll want to run is Docker container ls stack a. This will show all containers in the system, both running and not running. Docker image ls will show all images, which may give you a hint of what may have been run previously by red team, which could indicate a malicious image of some kind. And yes, make sure you change your passwords as well. Admin will be a good time for red team. You know, we can just go in there, log in as root, and have a good time. One thing, yeah. Let's go about threat hunting real quick. So there's a bunch of places you can look. PS-Off, as I talked about, or the PX Python package are both very good ways to notice any services. If you see a bash shell running or some type of other command that you don't recognize, you can definitely find it in there, try and root back to the parent process. And any of these applications, you'll see what's called PPID, which is parent process ID, which shows which process called that one. So you can kind of just jump back until you see something, you get to like the original initial process of Linux, and try and identify which ones are malicious in there, and which ones were just part of the persistence package. SS Tech Tupino, I love this one. Is that O is actually a 0, so dash TUPN0. This will list all sockets, TCP, UDP, RTU. P lists the process attached to the socket. So if you know in like CS2 or CS1, you create a socket in Java, that socket will be associated to that Java execution that's going on. N will prevent it from trying to map a port number to the port name, per se, so it doesn't try and convert 22 to SSH. just easier for you to see what's going on without having to think, what is my C4 on? And zero is a very funny thing. So in Linux, there's thing called raw sockets. Raw sockets allow you to listen on an interface beyond the firewall. So if there's a raw socket program running, it can send and receive packets even if your firewall is blocking it, because it is beyond the firewall. As I said, Wireshark is a very good GUI tool. If you do not have a GUI, you can use TCP dump, which you can even take to save into a PCAP file, which you can then read on a Wireshark application if you really want to use the GUI. Common ways that Red Team will set persistence: bash RC, bash profile, etc profile. These are files that are set by different shells, so ZSH has its own equivalent, and these are things that will be run whenever you start up bash or start up your system. So they can have in there ways to start their processes, wipe your firewall, stop your services. So reading through these files is a must to start your threat hunting. Systemd services, very common and easy way to get persistence on a Linux box. It will restart on boot. It can often have a restart always in there, so even if you kill the process, it'll just come back to life. And you can often hide it pretty well due to the abundance of processes. If you don't know what's supposed to be on your system, it can be good to hide in there as something that sounds about right. So I highly recommend, if you know your infrastructure before the competition, research what services are supposed to be on there so you know what's not supposed to be on there. Cron jobs. Cron jobs are something in Linux that allow you to run a command at a given interval. So you can set it to run every hour, every minute, every day, every fourth Sunday in October. So if there's something in the cron jobs for root will be running that command every whenever. So if you see that things are disappearing or happening at a repeated interval, it may be a sign that you have a cron job going on. For example, if you set your firewalls and 5 minutes later it goes away, and then you're playing cat and mouse every 5 minutes, chances are there's a 5-minute cron job in root, or Red Team just very good at being consistent. Kind of the best thing that I remember to add here, SUID and SGID. These are bits that can be set in the permissions of a Linux executable, where when you run the executable, it will run as the UID and GID of the owner of the binary. So if, let's say, bash has SUID, SGID set, even if you're not root, you can run bash as root. Same thing for Python. Python has a set UID set. So if you have Python with SUID on, you can then open a Python interpreter, set your UID to 0, and open a bash shell, and now you're root. There are many commands to do these. I'm going to let you research those on your own. Very helpful for other parts of the competition as well. Outside of Linux, there's also another Unix-based thing you may have to deal with in competition, which is pfSense routing. pfSense is a FreeBSD-based routing and firewall OS, very similar to Linux as it is Unix-based, but with Quarks because FreeBSD. You can do many cool things. Rootkit moment?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. You can do many quirky rootkits with this, such as, I don't know, oopskit. So there are two primary ways of accessing pfSense, that being the web GUI. pfSense comes with, by default, a web config, and the command line over SSH or console access. This is critical to keeping the rest of your services online. Because even if you lock down all of your Linux and all of your Windows boxes, the data still has to go through your router. So if it's being blocked at the router level, it will never make it to your host and your support check will still be failing. So the web config, you can really do anything in here. This has a full-on command line in it. It has a packet chaser. It has firewall rule settings. It's very powerful. You can see here you can set by the WAN or the LAN. You can set protocols, sources, the gateway, set descriptions, and then you can change the order to specify which rules take precedence of others. You have stuff like VPNs you can set up. You can set up NAT. You can change the interfaces all in here. And you can see here, there is a default password. At the same time, Red Team can do anything in here. This is written in PHP, so PHP backdoor is pretty good. If you set your default credentials, we're just going to log in, use the command line there, and it's going to be very funny. The CLI, when you boot into the PSN CLI, you're going to get something like this. Same thing to do SSH. And from here, you have a bunch of options you can set. So to access these commands, you have to hit 8, which is shell. If you want to do other things in here, you can. There's a PHP shell if you know how to use that. You can reset the web console. You can enable SSH, disable SSH. Set IPs for the interfaces, which can help with routing or fake routing. Reboot it, ping a host. A whole bunch of cool stuff. But yeah, 8 is the key one if you're going to be doing anything with commands. And the command for firewalls in BSD that uses pfSense is pfctl, which is packet filter control. And rules that happen in pfctl will not appear in your web GUI. So even if you have allow all in your web config and it's still being blocked, chances are pfctl is being used. Common flags will be TAC D to turn it off, which I do not recommend. pfctl TAC E will turn it back on. TAC F, capital F rules will remove all rules from there, which can often break things because the default policy in pfSense is drop. So if you have no rules, then you're going to drop all traffic. pfctl lowercase f file will apply a conf file, so you can specify wherever the file may be, and set the rules. I forget if I put an example of rules in here. There's a bunch of documentation online for this. pfctl TAC SR will list all rules set by the CLI, which is different than the rules set by the web GUI, as I said. Common file location you're going to have to deal with. User local www will hold the web GUI. So if you're trying to threat hunt for different PHP backdoors, try and debug something that's going on there, check the login process, you could go through there. Active rules that are going through the GUI will be in /temp/rules.debug. And red team? That's for you to find out.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Alright, so I know we've given you a lot of information, technical information at least. I'm going to ask you, first off, thank you for paying attention, at least, most of you. I know it's like in the room.
Oh, cool.
But I want to ask you, give us your attention for a little bit more, because we're going to talk about blue teaming in general, right? First thing, we've been mentioning injects this entire presentation. We're probably like, well, what the hell is an inject, and how do I write one? Well, I stole this slide from CCDC tryouts, and I put it in here to tell you how to write a good inject. So, overall, you want to write it like it's a lab report, right? I'm sure we've all taken at least some lab reports in here at RIT. It's basically a lab report, but it's professional, because the whole scenario is like you're working for a company, right? So the inject is addressed to your boss. You want a professional greeting and closing. This one's important, okay? Like, do I have anyone from CCDC in the room? No? Good. They got mad at us because we didn't put professional greeting in our injects. It was like, dude, why? But they did that, so you should include it. I'm telling you not to write it honestly. You want to have an executive summary. So this summary is basically like, a summary of the things you did, but you don't want to make it technical. I've seen a lot of teams that make their summaries too technical, and they get points docked for that. You have to assume your audience is something or someone that doesn't have any technical background whatsoever, and write like that as you're talking to them, and just say an overall idea of what you did. So it's a pretty bad way of saying that, but it's on the slide. You can do that. After that, you want to have some detailed information. So this is where you want to break down what you actually did and like do all the technical stuff. Make sure to reference screenshots, any articles you use, and just generally walk through what you did step by step. And then after that, you have an appendix where you label all your screenshots that you took. You should be taking screenshots, or take screenshots, and then label them. I've seen people not label them. That gets you points docked. And then that last paragraph, it says, it just says have screenshots. And then, of course, provide context for screenshots. So, like, reference them in the report, and then, like, say the screenshot is. Anything like that?
Oh, Joe.
All right. Next slide. We're talking about index more, or you can talk about the website.
So,
I don't know why I did that to you.
I don't know what's John. Injects are honestly just as important as uptime. Often they're given like near equal weight in a competition scoring. If it's between fixing one machine or completing the take the inject. You can take a couple more score checks of one machine failing especially if you are very lost on how to fix it. If it's a 1 second fix, sure, do it. But you should be prioritizing your injects. I highly recommend that you have one person on your team dedicated solely to inject, so they can be the one to organize it, try and coordinate the rest of the team of, hey, I need this from you, I need this from you, and then they're the ones writing up the reports and submitting it. Common injects you're going to have to do, creating network topology, so that system information we talked about is very important. You make it something like, I'm concerned that we may be vulnerable to incident vulnerability here. And then you have to research it and try and determine if you are or not and write a report to them. Maybe ask to implement a service on a machine, add a user to machine, make a meme. Sky's the limit. So whatever the boss asks, you're being paid by the boss. Do what the boss says.
Any or two last things here. You submit something for your inject.
Oh yeah.
There will be times where they ask you to do something that is not exactly the most secure thing you can do. So like they might be like, yo, can you add this user called a red team or not red team with a password of 1, 2, 3? And you might be like, well, the inject says like I have to, but I don't want it. Well, you can say you don't, and you can explain that you don't because it's not like it's not like secure or whatever. But make sure to submit something, right? Even if you can't submit the inject, if you can't get it done, just say that you tried and document when you tried and submit that. Also submit on time. You get penalized for late injects.
Yeah.
Submit on. Please submit on time.
Yeah, the rubric is often like 30% of your inject score is being on time. So even if you got nothing done but you submitted something on time, you at least got 30%.
Yes. And 30% is better than 0. Real.
That's math right there.
That is math. Alright. Next column is all about incident response. So I've mentioned that briefly. But basically, incident response is just your response. That's a bad explanation.
It's your response to an incident.
Yeah, your response to an incident. So if you detect like something bad happening on your network, incident response is the process you would take to respond to that. Some important things to know about incident response is that incidents will happen, no matter what. You will get breached. This is an eventuality. It's not a matter if, but when. And because of that, you want to be fast at doing it, so you can minimize the amount of damage that a red team does to your system. I have this time written down here. So the 1:10:60 time. If you want me to go to that IR, you can try and reach this. Basically, it is 1 minute to detect, 10 minutes to investigate, and 60 minutes to remediate. If you can do all of that at that time, you're probably going to be really good at IR, and you're probably going to stop red team.
No, I don't know about that one.
No, trust me. It'll be really fast. Incident response has a lot of different stages. I broke it down to like 6 here. There's obviously preparation, identifying the incident, containing the incident, and making sure that the red team doesn't, break out of the box and go to every other one. Removing, so eradication, and then recovery, like, rebuilding your system if they like broke it or something. And of course, lessons learned on how you can improve it. Also, for incident response, take screenshots, because there's an IR report at the end of RITSEC, and they ask you to like document all the stuff you found, and so having screenshots will help you with that.
Yeah.
Now, I think this is the last slide. I want to leave you guys with some general tips on blue teaming. These are things that I've learned the 4 years I've been here. So first off, how do you win? Well, that's simple. You just maintain your service uptime and do your index.
And your IR report.
That's it. So easy, so simple.
So simple.
You want to know your network, your systems, and your services. So this just comes down to preparation. You can't really spot any abnormal behavior unless you know what normal looks like. Right? So you want to just like get some understanding, some level of understanding of the stuff you're going to be dealing with. In terms of team building or whatever, you want to know your team and know your role within your team. So you want to know you guys' strengths and weaknesses. You want to know who's responsible for what, right? You don't want to show up on competition day and then it like turns out no one's managing the domain controller. And boom, your network explodes.
Yeah. Adding on to that, recommended structure I have, you have a 5-person team, would be 2 Windows people, 2 2 Linux/validated people and 1 person solely on inject. That can change. That can be whatever your team is built to do. But I have seen that works very well for teams.
Yes, and also establish some form of leadership. You got to be in charge. I mentioned this before, but you should think about how you can keep your systems doing only what they are intended to do, and not what red team wants them to do. Don't give red team easy wins, right? I already said that red team will break into your system eventually, but that doesn't mean you can't make them work for it. So do the simple stuff first. You want to prepare as much as possible beforehand. Preparation goes a long way. Right? You want to write out your plans for like 5-minute plan, hardening, threat hunting, instant response, stuff like that. You want to automate as much as possible. Talk about writing scripts. Because that'll keep you consistent, and also you move like this. You should always expect the unexpected. All right? Things happen in competition. Right? You might show up and your router just broken from the start and it sucks.
Real.
But it might happen. Red team might deploy something on your system that causes it to brick itself and die.
Oops.
And that sucks. And you didn't expect it to happen, but it did. So you should just expect that things will go crazy in a competition, because they always do. That's what makes it fun. And of course, like I said, do the simple stuff first. You want to write stuff down. I can't tell you how many times I've forgotten stuff during the competition because I didn't write it down, and I thought, oh, I'll just remember. And then the competition just goes sideways, and then I forget about it, and then it comes back to haunt me in the form of my scoreboard going red. So write stuff down in the competition, please. You want to come up with quick solutions to the right problems. I think the most important part is just coming up with solutions quickly, right? Because every second counts, right? I think like time matters in terms of like the difference between red team staying on a system and then moving to other ones, and them being kicked out of the network because it was good. And of course, I have some things you should look into. Preventative and detective controls, you should look into those, the concept of those. You should always try to get preventative controls, because it's good to prevent red team from doing stuff, but it is more important to detect them so that you can respond. Because the last thing you want to do is get blindsided. And then, of course, the concept of defense and death, which you should research, because it is a very useful strategy for planning out how you're going to secure your network.
Real.
Of course, here's a ton of resources that I have compiled. I had like a bunch to Linux last night.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, this will be on the website. I think it's ritsec.club/education. So you can grab the slides there and click on all these funny links.
Yeah, please click on all the funny links. I swear, you will learn a lot. Reading is probably like half of blue teaming, honestly. You gotta learn a lot of different things.
You gotta know what you're defending to defend.
Ooh.
Yeah. Any questions?
Yeah, any questions?
We're chilling.
No questions? Okay, let's give them a round of funny little thing. So, Chandi, when you're threat hunting, would you consider this lanyard a threat?
No,
No way. Is it Chandi's first time?
It's Chandi's first presentation, guys. Clap it up for Chandi.